Chapter 5. The Girl and the Agent. Celeste ran into the dark storage room. There were stacks of crates on either side of a narrow corridor, bordered by a perimeter walkway. She slipped down the center aisle, cast in the green glow of the exit sign, and skidded to a halt behind the cover of the last stack of boxes. She didn't dare look back to the door. She caught her breath and pulled a list from the pocket of her skirt. She crossed out the 2 names in the line, adding them to the collection of expended contacts. Only 2 names left, she thought to herself. Why couldn't the odd man write any faster? Celeste felt the Quattro energy as it coursed through her veins. It came from her thread, the connection between her body and her black hole Veritas. The energy pooled in her hands, begging her to use it. It gave her the power to extend her influence on the world. It would not help her right now. Her attacker didn't need sight to find her. They could sense the energy in her body, and this would be her downfall. Celeste shut out the sensation of Quattro, meditating through her nerves. The entrance doorway opened, moonlight spilling into the room. Celeste gasped softly and resisted the temptation to look. She heard it creak shut and heard the metal footsteps of her stalker. They clanked on the concrete floor, edging up the left-hand walkway. Celeste's mind buzzed. She could feel her heart thumping in her chest through her throat. The energy of the black hole pooled again in her hands, and this time by her command. She could stay here in fear and hope that the attacker didn't find her, or she could use the power she was given by the universe and fend them off as she ran again. Running, always running, she thought to herself. The shadow of her attackers, long talons, were thrown across the left-hand wall, cast in a corona of green light. Celeste watched the blackness stalk closer from the corner of her eye. Before she saw the attack, she could see it in her soul. A bolt of bright indigo quattro, a bullet of energy surrounded by 3 rings, illuminated the room in dazzling light. Celeste extended her left hand to the attack, absorbing the energy through the veins in her arm. She passed the bolt through her torso and out her other arm into the ground. It dissipated into the concrete, its 3 glowing rings spreading out radially, melting and bubbling the concrete until their light died. Celeste leaped to her feet. She stared down the barrel of the attacker's weapon, an umbrella with a glowing purple end. The attacker stood tall, their glowing eyes hidden behind a floppy hat and their metal form covered by a long trench coat, the only hint of their Seneva power being their bold, energetic presence and their metal, high-heeled feet. I didn't expect either our goal to be so easy to catch, they said. Their voice ran silky and sultry. They advanced on Celeste. I also didn't expect you to run so easily. You have a reputation. Eva Argol isn't this easy to catch, Celeste spat in her thick French accent. She flicked her wrist and her sword was thrown into existence. Its blue hilt rested snugly in her grasp, its tip extended, growing from the hilt to meet the butt of the umbrella before her. You found me not there, but you wish to find Eva Argol because I'm the Eva who built her reputation. Celeste felt her soul's grip, and using Quattro from the black hole Veritas, she powered it. Her crimson lips grinned. From her free hand erupted a plume of dazzling blue fire. She swung the tendrils of hot, dripping plasma at the umbrella lady. The fire was the extension of her powered soul, her connection to the universe. The surrounding boxes burst spectacularly into flames. Black smoke amassed quickly, burning bright over the blue light. The umbrella lady stumbled against the heat of the attack and was blinded by the smoke. Celeste kicked off the floor and launched herself into the center clearing. She swung herself around the corner crate, sending it toppling into the opening. A good slipping hazard, she thought. She sprinted towards the green light of the exit sign. Plumes of thick smoke creeped behind her. A bolt of indigo quattro that she had not sensed through her adrenaline zipped past her head, singeing her chestnut hair. She threw her hand backwards and fired a bolt of her own blue quattro. It hopelessly missed, she could tell, as she hadn't aimed it. Another indigo one came, but she sensed it and dropped to the floor, letting it fly overhead. Celeste rolled on the concrete and sprung back to her feet. The footsteps behind her were close, but the door was still seconds away. Her mind panicked, but she had one last idea. She summoned Quattro energy in both of her hands, and using it to manipulate her soul beyond her body, blasted jets of hot blue fire from her palm and sword. She painted the aisle of boxes in thick, deadly flames. The jets reached far beyond the clearing. Immediately, the smoke in the room thickened and obscured all sight. The room was an oven. A Seneva could sweat through their armor in this. Celeste lunged at the door and threw herself out of it. She slammed it shut behind her and took a tiny, intense flame to the door's lock. The umbrella lady charged down the aisle on the other side. Her footsteps rang into this new hallway. Her body thudded against the door, which bowled Celeste over in fright. She dropped her sword as she fell, but recovered herself quickly. Curiosity kept her from running. The door handle jiggled, then shook violently. They pounded their fists on the door, melting the lock and told them forever, Celeste realized as the door shook so violently that it might give way. She sprinted down this hallway and through the front door of this building. She burst out into the busy nightlife streets of Melbourne City. People bustled in large crowds, moving like a river along the sidewalk. She put her sword back where it had come from and ran into a taxi. She handed the driver a list from her pocket with the 2 uncrossed names and their addresses. He could take her to safety. An Argyle gang member was strapped to a chair in a white room. The chair was bulky and metal, like a dentist chair, with straps that were thick and made of dark leather. The man, tall and strong, banged against the restraints. His hair, wet from sweat, slapped his face as he struggled to free himself. Just weeks ago, he was ambushed in an alley by agents of the Farah Heslick, Seneva from the Empire of the Black Suns. But he had escaped. Their trackers were good, better than any he'd ever seen. They'd found him, they'd captured him again, and when he had woken from his drugged stupor, he was in this chair. He yelled into the void beyond him. His thread, the connection between him and his black hole, had been neutralized. He could not draw on its power to get him out of here. Next to him, on a metal surgery bench, was an array of space-aged looking instruments and life monitors. A wall in front of him was made of one-way mirrors, and on the left side of the wall was a bulky metal door. Its lock clacked, and it opened. An armoured figure emerged from the opening. The light shone off their metal plating of colours silver, teal and gold. The joints were inhumanly thin and their fingers long and gangly. Their helmet looked eternally angry, with 2 green glowing eyes and a triangular grill where the mouth would be. 2 pipes extended from it to a tank on their back. They strutted over to the constrained man and stood before him in a power stance. "Vestus," the Argyle man groaned. "Argyle will hear about this. Fuck it. Heslick will hear about this." "Farah Heslick approved this," Vestus retorted in his posh voice. "One way or the other, you will be a useful Seneva to the cause of your brothers and sisters. So far, your actions under Argyle and his lead have eventuated in the separation of our people from society. I'm giving you a chance to change. You can switch your allegiance to Heslick and the Empire, who will do good for Seneva relations. Or you can protest, and I'll use you for my studies. Either way, you further the advancement of Heslick's cause. Choose wisely." "I know what you do," the Argyle man spat. "Don't hide behind a veil of moral good. I'll never bow to a bunch of pushovers like you." "You'll regret that," Vestus warned, "but I suppose you'll do more good for us like this. You can't imagine the technological advancements I'll make from the data in your thread." The Seneva went to pick up one of the instruments, a thick white device with 2 probes on a spinning head. "Where's Olom?" the Argyle gangster started. "He wasn't mad like you nuts. He was a reasonable leader." Vestus laughed, revving the device by pulling its trigger. "Olom was a coward and a traitor to the Seneva people," he said. "He led us here when he gave up on his position, and Argyle picked up the pieces of Seneva society and drove our name into the ground. Heslick is the only hope for good Seneva in the world. He's doing better things for the Empire of the Black Suns than any other Seneva could. It's because of people like you that we're hated, and that a bigoted idiot with a name like Fairy Smog has any credibility in this world." Vestus reached for the man's shirt with his long, cold fingers. He delicately unbuttoned it as the man squirmed under his grasp. From the life monitor, he affixed 8 cold sensor pads to the man's chest. The computer sparked with signals. Then, with a spinning device in hand, Vestus walked around the table behind the man. He pointed the device, with its rotating, flaccid prongs, the biggest bone in the man's neck. The Argyle man wriggled against the constraints. Vestus grabbed the man's throat with his creepy fingers. They pressed on his flesh. The door opened. Vestus lowered the instrument. The umbrella lady stepped into the room. She stood her umbrella near the door and hung her coat and hat on a nearby hook. Their armoured body was minimalistic. It was highly mechanical and made of shining silver pieces. On her smooth head, usually hidden by her floppy hat, were 8 small purple eyes. "Ah, Tona Narcissus, come in," Vestus instructed. "You're just in time to witness the data collection." "I've got news for you, Vestus," she said, pausing close to the door. She eyed Vestus and his tools with disgust. Her voice, to Vestus, could only be described as sensual. He had to put down the instrument to concentrate. "News?" he inquired, finally finding his words. "Eva Argyle is in Melbourne. I've been tracking her." "You mean the Eva Argyle?" The lost daughter of the Green Dragon himself knocks out our goal? Exactly, she stated. The child claims not to be either our goal, but then how often does a real fugitive accept their title? She strutted towards Vestas now that he'd dropped the odd implement. Her footsteps calculated to twist her metal hips, her heels clacking. She stopped just before the chair. And there's more. I came across the signals of 2 new, somewhat strange Seneva. One of them seemed quite powerful. I think you'd find them extremely interesting to study. Yes, of course, Vestas was sweating through his armor. And Eva Argold, too. Not only would a Seneva of that bloodline provide some brilliant data points, but she would fetch us a good sum of money with Argold himself. Do you know the bounty on her head? I know it, the umbrella lady spoke. Good, Vestas composed himself. Bring the 3 Seneva back to me, then. As soon as you can. I'd be keenly interested in them all. As you wish, she said. She turned to leave, then paused. What about the other Argolds from the alley? She asked. Don't worry, Vestas smiled through his helmet. I have Lion's foot on them. He gets results. Whilst Vestas had been preparing his victim, a Seneva covered in bronze and iron-coloured armour with gleaming red eyes had walked out of the front door of the Empire compound. He was tall and incredibly bulky. The face of his helmet was flat and unemotive. They did not like what Vestas did to the Argolds they brought back. They never stayed around to witness the studies. The bronze Seneva stepped into the car park. They removed their armour and donned their riding leathers, making sure to store their heavy iron chain under the hulking black jacket. They put on their helmet, a matte black mushroom helmet with a full face mask, and mounted their vintage racer bike. Its single headlight burned the road alight as the bike's engine roared into life. The bronze Seneva, known as Lion's Foot, dropped the beast into gear and ran it through the back streets. Vestas had a tip-off midweek to the location of a fugitive Argol. The Empire had a vast network of Seneva in Melbourne who would submit tips, and Vestas had designed his own frequency scanner devices to interrupt law enforcement chatter. The combined information told Lion's Foot that the fugitive would be in the container fields by the docks. Once there, Lion's Foot would have to sense the Argol's presence to track him down. All Seneva could, at some level, connect to the Quattro field which permeated everything. Seneva left signals in the field when they used Quattro, and these could be detected to track a Seneva's movements. If they were smart, this Argol man would not be using Quattro, but Lion's Foot didn't take him for a thinking type. His bike raced past the city in the late-night lights. The lines of colour smeared across his helmet as he soared past the glowing silhouette of Melbourne's skyline. He reached a sea of containers stacked into high towers by the dockside. He slalomed his steel horse between the high piles of metal boxes, under the cranes beneath the purple moonlit night. He could sense the man here. They were using their abilities without care for who might feel their presence. Lion's Foot followed their trail to a contractor's hut in the centre of the dockyard. He parked the bike behind the nearby rolling crane and strided his way over to the building. Stealth wasn't the bronze Seneva's greatest asset. He subsequently didn't bother to try. He was revered by Hesslick for his efficiency. There were multiple men in the shack, and they felt a disturbance all together at once. Lion's Foot could see them shuffling about through the window. One man peeked out the blinds, throwing lines of yellow light across the bronze Seneva's motorbike helmet. Lion's Foot reached behind his back and pulled out the iron chain he'd stored near the leather jacket. The peeping man yelped in surprise. His eyes bulged. He maniacally pawed at the blinds to make them shut. The men scattered around the room, a storm of panic. Glass smashed, metal fell from tables. The bronze Seneva smiled. This man was frantic. The Argol man squabbled for the door, falling out of the contractor's hut with a polished wooden staff in hand. This was the man from the alley.
I heard you work for Argol,
Lion's Foot said in his modulated voice. Yeah, I do, the man croaked. He cracked the wooden staff against the ground. Sparks of electricity sprayed off on impact. A constant arc crackled from the pole's end into the asphalt. What's it to you? Lion's Foot remained silent. The chain unfurled in his hand, snaking onto the ground. Get out of here before this gets serious, the Argol men were warned. The bronze Seneva once again did not speak. He tightened his grip on the chain's links in his hands. The mobster then shouted. He raised his staff and blew a bolt of green Quattro from its end. The bronze Seneva raised his left hand to the bolt. He absorbed it through his arm and directed it away from his head, through his torso, and out through the chain. The mobster's wooden staff erupted with sparks of electricity, forming an arc of blinding plasma. It cracked through the air towards Lion's Foot. Quattro flowed into Lion's Foot's body. He used it to extend his soul's reach into the earth before him. He could sense the shadow of his hand extend beyond his physical limits and anchor into the asphalt. Lion's foot braced, grappling at the ground, and then heaved upwards. The asphalt between the two men breached the road surface, erupting from the ground to form a rocky wall. The violent lightning was absorbed into the earthen stack. With a push of his influence, Lion's foot sent the dislodged wall of road hurtling towards the Algol mobster. They rolled out of the way and tried to stand, but were thrown off their feet when the massive rock smashed behind them. Lion's foot tensed his grip on the chain. Through his soul's connection to it, he could feel every atom of iron and every link of it. He could control their position in space and the bonds between them. He cracked the long chain like a deadly whip. It smashed against the asphalt, then hovered in the air at his soul's command. The Argol man finally got to his feet and stared at the floating metal linkages with terror. Lion's foot cracked it again. This time it lunged and whipped around the man. The linkages of the chain tied the mobster's hands to his sides. He dropped his wooden staff and fell to his knees, squirming to break free. Lion's foot strolled over to the man, who lay constricted in the metal python. He raised a casual hand to the man's head and commanded a bolt of Quattro energy through his arm. The red, three-ringed bullet emerged from his left hand and hit the mobster in the back of the neck, where the thread to his black hole connected to his body. The staff on the floor shattered and sublimated as the foreign energy was absorbed by the man. His thread was neutralized. Lion's foot loaded the gangster onto the back of his motorcycle. He took the man back to Festus.